Hello and welcome to SME Play and Direkt Studios in this live market update with PILA Pharma. Joining us today from Skåne and Copenhagen are Chief Scientific Officer Dorte and Chief Executive Officer Gustav. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are watching this live, you are welcome to post questions in the chat here right on YouTube. And we also have received some questions in advance via email. And the reason that we're doing this webcast today is because of the news that came out yesterday in a press release from the company, and we were going to bring some clarity around that. So the press release basically contained two main messages. First, that PILA Pharma has conducted a preclinical rat study in obesity with inconclusive results. And second, and more important perhaps, is that the company is now moving forward with a new clinical contract research organization for human trials. So let's start by clarifying what the rat study results actually mean. So let's turn to you, Dorte. Does inconclusive mean that the rat study failed and that the drug doesn't work?
No, not at all. Actually, we can't conclude on the results so far in terms of whether our drug works on body weight regulation or not. What we can conclude is that the studies were completed within timelines and according to protocol. So the studies themselves went very well, and it's a very good partner that we chose, of course, you know that. But we had to change formulation just before we started the study, and with that came a risk that the drug, our drug XEN-D0501, was not delivered to be absorbed to the bloodstream as well as we had planned. We planned to use another formulation. So we cannot say anything about the effect of the drug because we simply still do not know how much was absorbed. So we are going to, we amended the protocol before Christmas to make sure we could take blood samples from each rat, because it's each rat that we need to see that they actually got exposure. So we took 3 blood samples from each rat, not during the whole study, but at a time point like late in the treatment period. On one day, and we have now shipped these samples for analysis, and we will wait for the result of this to see if was there exposure, and if there was, how much, and should it be related to efficacy.
Yeah. So just quickly then
long answers always, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So let's quickly then turn to you, Gustav, then from the CEO perspective too. How should the investors interpret these kind of studies that come up with inconclusive results?
Well, I mean, I think we clarified that pretty well in the press release in December. So to see the reaction that we've seen both yesterday as well as today, I think is maybe a bit excessive and maybe a bit surprising. For sure, of course, we can conclude that we did not achieve effect on body weight. That was the outline goal. So we have not met that goal, but everything else has been done according to plan. And so, I mean, we're following through on what we promised in connection to our fundraise in the summer, which is to move into to human studies where we will assess the drug in obesity. And of course, here it's important to note that we already have a formulation that we know can deliver exposure to humans. So we actually feel quite a lot more confident moving from preclinical into and back into clinical studies where we've been in the past.
It's actually back into the clinic. I think that's worth noting also.
Yes.
Since we have done clinical studies before.
Yeah, so going back to you then, Dorte, why did you conduct a rat study in the first place and not go straight to human trials, since you have tried toxicity and other things with this particular molecule?
Yeah, one could question that with good reason. I mean, I've been in favor of moving directly to clinics because we had a clinical ready compound, and we did that successfully in diabetes. Actually, we did a small study in in diabetes before we went into the clinical testing for efficacy. So There are two reasons. Well, one is that this is how you normally do it. So it's also for us in our development to become a maybe more mature company that we are going to conduct probably more and more like preclinical stuff if we have new compounds into development before we take it to clinic. So it's kind of like doing it as the peers. The other thing is that we had some data from a study I did many years back at Novo, where we did have efficacy in a rat model, the sugar rat model. And so we strongly believe that we would be able to do it, and for that it would be maybe, it's not necessarily to get, well, efficacy in rats would be needed to get efficacy approval in humans, but the next step is anyway to do this dose finding study, where you could get efficacy as a secondary result. But it's also because, of course, as Gustav has mentioned many times, our goal is to bring to market a small, suitable tablet treatment for obesity and obesity-related diseases and disorders. But given that the late-stage development costs are so high that it's, as we see it right now, not possible for us to do it, our strategy is to get to a point where we can attract a suitable partner for co-development or for out-licensing. So these rat studies, of course, were kind of it would have been a way to get into more serious dialogue already by now with potential partners. So it was what we called this summer a bet on obesity, and it is a bet. So with a bet comes a high risk, but also high gain if you succeeded. And unfortunately, we didn't succeed on getting proof of concept right now, but due to an unknown event that we hadn't been able to foresee, namely that our formulation for rats that had been tolerated very well in toxicology studies of 13 weeks, this formulation was not tolerated. Well, actually it was, because it was tested in August by Gubra in fat rats, and there it was tolerated. And then we signed the contract and so on, and then in late October we were informed, no, they had to redo the test because we were going to use a little bit more of the volume to be put into the stomach of the rats. And then suddenly the rats didn't tolerate it. We still don't know why. It seems to be a formulation-related thing, but neither the deer rats nor the sugar rats. And also we tested another formulation, lipid formulation, because we have a lipid-soluble compound, so we needed this kind of sticky thing. And none of these two rat models could tolerate that also. So we were left to either we cancel the studies, or Gubra suggested, okay, we have 3 formulations that we know are well tolerated. And we looked at them and they were probably not super optimal for our molecule, probably maybe the opposite because they were water-based. But we were either we do cancel the study and then go back and find a new formulation, but that could take, maybe a half a year or a year and still no results, or we try and see, okay, let's see what results we get and get some experience from the collaboration with Gubra. I mean, they're smart, it's a good company, so they can deliver other services to us, we hope, in the future. But so we made that, I made that recommendation to the management team, and Gustav and Hampus supported that, and then the board endorsed that decision. But of course, it was based on a risk analysis, and here I didn't. Well, we did. We will see when we get the PK results if these rats were exposed. But of course, what we had all hoped for, to get a proof of concept result here in January that could lift the value and maybe even initiate a partnership dialogue.
Exactly. So that's from what I understood too from talking to Gustav before, that was one of the objectives here, is to get results quicker through the rat study and then being able to engage in some partner dialogues. But
exactly, it's
but
more
now,
the business.
But just moving this ahead, and just now, I think that the main message from what I understood reading this press release is that now you're moving into human clinical studies right away and accelerating that path. And perhaps, Gustav, from an investor's perspective, could you explain why that is a critical milestone here, and why the rat study perhaps was not as important as this, although that's kind of what the market stuck to yesterday when they were trying to make sense out of this press release, which is not so easy when it's biotech.
No, and there was a lot of information in the press release, but I think it's what we saw yesterday was perhaps also a signal that we've managed to come across to a lot of potential interested investors as an aspiring company within this space. We have seen quite a lot of interest, and of course we saw a huge reaction yesterday to some news for which we perhaps feel like that was a bit excessive. But beyond that, I mean, we have seen deals in the space for preclinical assets, that's for sure. But above all else, most pharma companies, and we talk to them, they tell us they want something that is ready for later stage clinical development. So from phase 1 and forward. So it is pivotal for us to actually move forward and get some human data, as that will carry a much bigger weight than preclinical data in this space in particular.
Of course, and I was reading online too that like the whole purpose of what you're doing here is to show that the pill instead of the injectables that you have now is actually the way forward. And of course the rats, they couldn't eat pills, so they had to dilute it, and it became sort of a way to walk around to actually see.
It's a little bit backwards.
Yeah, a little bit backwards to see the results. But now in humans, of course, they can digest the compound, and that's the way it was supposed to be administered. So, Gustav, again, could you explain a little bit regarding the new clinical research organization and this contract that you have going, what that means and what investors should take out of this press release and expect going forward?
Well, it's investors can for sure take that as a sign that we're moving forward. We're thinking about the future. We're maybe we're still assessing the results from the rat studies, but we're definitely keeping our foot on the speeder. I know Dorte has been very, very busy, not just evaluating this particular CRO, but many others as well, to find the best possible solution for what we have in mind going forward, not necessarily just for obesity, but potentially also for other indications which we may have in mind for our molecule. And so now the process starts with shaping up a clinical trial application and have that sent in. And once that's sent in, and the authorities have had a chance to look at it and maybe perhaps given approval to start a clinical study, that's when it starts to get really interesting.
Yeah. So. Again, I mean, what should investors focus on then going forward? What are the next milestones, so to speak, now that you have this contract in place?
Well, I mean, we have communicated in the press release yesterday that we do anticipate to be able to send in a clinical trial application before the end of Q1. So that is, of course, quite a short time frame.
Yeah, it's coming up soon.
Actually, we said around Q1, end of Q1. But anyways.
Yeah, I'm
before Easter, hopefully.
always the one to pressure the other team to keep the timelines before what's been communicated. But it's just to say that we are moving forward, and I know Dorte is very heavily engaged with this particular CRO to make a killing clinical trial application that is really adequate for what is needed and can take us to the next level, which is in clinical studies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Dorte, do you have any, before we move into questions, do you have any final from a scientific perspective, final words to kind of summarize the next steps here and what we need to prove?
Yeah, absolutely. We're kind of back into the clinical track, and what we have missed in PILA, besides maybe significant funding, is kind of a long-term clinical partner. So we have been thinking about, should we build up internally and have our own team? And that takes some time. It's not impossible. We're located in the Copenhagen area, and there have been some layoffs in the vicinity of some companies in the region. So we would probably, but we judged during the autumn, we looked at different models, that it would be easier for us to dock into a really established, with proven track record and quality and experience and so on, a clinical CRO. So we did engage with the CRO in the UK earlier, but that turned out to be, they were super nice, and but they they probably sold themselves a little bit too well. So they didn't have it was quite a new CRO, so maybe they lacked the kind of the solidity that we were looking for. So what we found now is a clinical research organization that has its own clinics. They have a massive experience with clinical studies and the quality related to that and the conduct, and they do fixed contracts again, so they kind of stick to the timelines to get their own payments. And for us, it's like we're dogging into an established clinical research organization, so we can lift our ambitions to do clinical development. Is not like really rocket science, but it's just really big, and it requires a lot of highly skilled and highly trained personnel. And I think with this organization, I have really great impression of them. And also, I mean, we signed this agreement on Monday, but we actually started the work before, and that also speaks to this mutual trust that, of course, they expect us to pay, and we, of course, will pay them for the work they did before we signed the contract. So the work is already ongoing, and as Gustav said, it has like a two-step thing. First, you prepare the study, and that's actually quite a big thing, and then you prepare all the documents to submit, and then you hopefully get approval, maybe after some dialogue, and then you start the execution phase, where you enroll patients, or in this case, it would be kind of healthy obese volunteers, to be tested in this study. Yeah. And for this particular study, since the trigger, and we have discussed a diabetes study for quite some time, and we never really got around that. So we also in the strategy decided, let's go for the obese first, because they're less diseased. So it is about getting up in dose safely and treating for longer. Now with this clinical CRO, they have their own clinics, also a phase 1 unit in the hospital, so that we can safely supervise these subjects when we dose in clinics. So that's it. So we hope to get approval before the summer and get going, and then we haven't signed the second part of the agreement, but
well, it seems like
when
you're
we
busy.
are close to that, we can say something about the timelines. Yeah, but I think this it's very busy when it's all on your desk. But now I'm luckily sharing it with a lot of other desks in this CRO. So, and they are competent. So I'm sure we will see some action in this space now, I hope.
Yeah, and then we have some questions coming in here too. We don't have too much time left, so I want to get into some of them. We have 2 questions, one coming in from the chat here and one that was also emailed that's more towards you, I guess, Gustav. What are your funding alternatives now then with the warrants coming up here and looking at the pricing of that?
Yeah, of course, it's looking increasingly tricky. I think that's obvious to everyone who's holding warrants or not necessarily holding warrants. But we're doing everything we can now to of course clarify our position and to of course hopefully explain in a simple manner what the next steps are and what the value triggers will be. But that being said, I mean, we're a listed company, so there's of course many different ways in which we can take in new capital if we wish. Right now we're in a reporting season, so I can't comment on our actual cash balance, of course. But what I can say is that we took in a lot of money in the summer, and it's for sure not everything of that has been spent. So right here now we feel quite comfortable, and if the need to exercise any form of capital injection arises, then we will find the best possible solution, not just myself and Dorte, but of course with our board, and that can be in the shape of a rights issue, it can be directed issue, it can be loan agreements. I mean, we're open to all the solutions out there, and we keep our finger on the trigger to take the best offer when it comes and if it's needed.
Okay, thank you for that clarification then on financing and your balance sheet position. We got a question in here too, and I guess this could be directed to you, Dorte. Are there any parts of the data that's coming in or that perhaps is expected to come in for this rat study that could still be considered positive or useful for you?
Dorte, you're muted.
Oh, we lost you there for a second.
Maybe I felt unmute. Sorry about it. Maybe that was a relief. Anyway, I think any data you get is knowledge, and you learn from that. Even if it's negative, you start thinking and so on. I think in this, we did have more groups than the treatment dose of Sendo, our compound. So we have other data that we have not yet communicated that we have also retrieved, and maybe we will share that if there's something interesting there. We haven't analyzed it yet. But I think in terms of the effect of our molecule, it all depends on whether the rats actually could absorb the molecule to a certain level where it would be able to exert an effect. But I would say besides the PK, so the exposure, the level of Sendo in the bloodstream, that will, of course, give us some explanation to the extent of effects. But we have sampled body weight and some fat mass and things like that. And also we are waiting for results on fat content in tissues.
Yep.
We are also waiting for inflammatory markers, which of course is a really also maybe a sign of efficacy, because our molecule should have a strong effect on inflammation. It's quite a big data set, and in any case, we will learn from it, I'm sure, and I will promise you all. And what I have proposed, Gustav, is maybe we should see if we should verify something of this. Maybe do the study in a separate lab just to double check. So we are looking into this also, if possibly to do that, pending, of course, also the funding situation going forward, what we will prioritize of both the money we have left and the money we hope to get in. There will be learnings for sure. And I hope, so Gubra has said to us that their final report will be available by the 27th of February. Most likely we'll have the results before. And then again, these PK results, they are a little bit, they're actually quite fast to do. They can do it within a week, but the problem is that they need some reference compounds for the assay, and that can take up to 3 weeks to get it. So it might take a month before we get that, but it's like within not so long.
Yeah. And some final words then. Thank you, Dorte, again for being so specific and really getting into what happened here, because I think that helps clarify a lot. And for Gustav then perhaps a few final words for investors. We know that biotech stocks and these kind of study results, when they come out, can push heavy reactions on the stock market up and down. But from what I understand, this study was inconclusive, which means that you can't really draw any conclusions from it yet. So would you perhaps want to summarize the situation from an investor standpoint?
Well, I think for sure it's at best it's premature to conclude that it was a failure. So I mean, from my point of view, and I've noted this in the past as well. I think before Christmas, at one of these webinars or presentations, we talked. I mentioned that I think that we are maybe the lowest valuated public company in the world in the obesity space, and of course, given the share development in the past couple of days, that has not changed at all in the wrong direction, if we can say so. So from my point of view, I mean, we're definitely still a candidate in this space, and as far as it goes with the rat studies, I mean, it's unconfirmed. So as long as something is not confirmed, I think it's premature to draw the conclusion that we are not a contender. So we will keep pushing, and of course, at this point in time, that may be a very, very interesting time point for new investors or existing investors to join the path forward.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much, both Dorte and Gustav, for those clear explanations. And with that, I also want to thank all of you who tuned in for today's Q&A session. And also, I know that both Gustav and Dorte are available if you want to email them in the questions afterwards. And perhaps, Gustav, you can say the email address is there's an investor inbox where you can email.
Yeah, you can find both mine and Dorte's emails on our website, but we also have a dedicated email address called investor@pilapharma.com or info@pilapharma.com. So there's plenty of ways to get in touch with us, and we are very much interested in clarifying any doubts that people out there may be having.
Yeah, maybe I could add, actually my mail is not on the homepage anymore, luckily for that, but I'm just behind the website. But I would say that since there are so many questions right now, and very good ones too, that we can even learn from by thinking about them, how to answer, we could maybe consider to follow up with a new session next week, because there are many questions right now, and I think they're relevant to more than one at a time. So that might be a suggestion for us to follow up with something like that next week or in a couple of weeks, so when we have the results.
That's great. And you also have a Q4 report coming up fairly soon, right?
Exactly. So maybe in that conjunction.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you again, Dorte and Gustav, and thank you to all of you who tuned in to watch this, and we will see you next time.